Kia ora koutou, katoa, ko Emma MacDonald toku ingoa. Thank you, Albert. Albert kept on ringing me before this saying, oh yeah, we're just going to add a little bit of extra time on. We're just going to add a little bit of extra time on. So I'm really, really sorry. You've got me for a full hour. It could go random, I'm warning you now. You're not going to want to listen to me for the full hour. So at the end of the session, we're going to do some group work because we all know that everyone loves some group work. Hopefully it will be fun and basically you'll start developing my work program for me. But I'm just going to take you a little bit through what we're doing at StatsNZ and have a bit of a chat about data ethics. Just for context, I am not a researcher. I'm not an AI, I'm not in tech at all. I'm a failed policy analyst. I've been in policy for years. I've been working in areas from science policy, business incubation, through to people who are incarcerated or maritime freight and really big trucks, which are way more interesting than you would ever imagine. By the way, I can talk to you about it at lunchtime. I've been in the digital space for a while. My specialty is really going out and talking to people and actually thinking about what does the data and the technology mean for society? This revolution isn't about the technology, it's about what's happening in society, and that's what I'll be sort of talking about a little bit through it. I've got some slides. That's just to keep me on track because I will go random, just the nature of how my mind works. If there are questions, comments, or you want to have a little bit of audience participation, just yell out. I'm more than happy to stop my talk at any time and have a conversation. I find that's usually better for the flow of it anyway. I'll also talk a lot with my hands, so I apologise for that. They will be going. I've ticked off this first bit that says, introduce me. Well done, me. Right, so what is data ethics? So I was brought in to establish this thing called the Centre of Data Ethics and Innovation. It started its life as the Centre for Data Ethics and AI, and I'm going to get into why we dropped AI in a wee minute. But the whole idea was, within government, I don't know if you've heard, sometimes we don't talk to people. Sometimes we just go and do stuff ourselves. So the whole idea was, have a centre where we were outwardly facing and looking at growing a network, talking to people and actually starting to bring people together across government, business, academia, the non-profit sector, to be able to say, we're a really small nation. We can't do this all individually in a whole pile of silos. Actually, how can we work together to start thinking about what we need to put in place now for when AI and other data-driven technologies really start picking up speed and start impacting our society. So data ethics is very much about understanding the whole cycle of data and the harm that can happen at all of the different places throughout it, and realising that a lot of the time at the end of a data point is a human. And we need to be thinking about actually what's happening with that human and thinking about what sort of things can we do, what systems can we put in place at each point of the data cycle in order to be able to understand what harm may impact on society, but also what harm may happen if we don't do this. A lot of the time, particularly when you read in the media about the robots are going to kill you, we forget about the fact that actually there is huge potential here and we can do some really, really good things for people across Aotearoa and across the world. And so therefore we can't get too scared and not move. And so kind of balancing that up. When you talk about data ethics, there are key things that keep on popping up in all the principles. There is things like transparency. In this day and age, we talk more now about explainability because transparency gets quite hard within the box. Justice and fairness, and actually what is this going to impact on the people in the data, but also the people who aren't in the data, and I'll get to that in a wee bit too. Thinking about maleficence, I can't even get that out today, sorry, I'm quite tired, and so therefore my language is going. But colloquially, we come down to summing it up as, don't be a dick with your data, be sensible. Thinking about responsibility and accountability, and also This includes your responsibility to the communities you are working with. Actually, it's not okay anymore just to take your data and then not go back and talk to the people that the data is on. It is not okay to not think about the good of the whole and actually, are you benefiting the communities you're working with this data that you are taking from them? And so actually starting to think about what the impact is in the real world when you work within your labs and do things. Also privacy. Privacy will come up time and time again, and it's really interesting. I know later on in the panel we have a bit of a conversation about privacy and what that means from an individual and from a collective, so we'll probably dig into that there. When we started this journey, it was focused on AI, and I know this conference is focused on AI. We moved it to innovation, because AI is just going to become a bedrock, right? And once it starts colliding with other pieces of data-driven technology or other technologies, it's going to change in a way, and you won't even notice it as AI anymore. It will be whatever the new big thing is. I wanted the centre to be completely technology agnostic. I don't care what technology you're using. I care about the data, and at the end of that data point is a human. And so understanding what this may happen on that person back there, and as things go faster and faster and faster, what is the divergence that's going to occur so that people who are already having harm done in today's world, it will just be completely magnified in 5, 10, well actually even 2 years' time. So understanding that. We were born out of a thing called the Digital Strategy for Aotearoa, which DIA, the Department of Internal Affairs, released a few years ago. And in it, it said that we needed to have a centre that focused solely on ethics, so that you had the Cassandra in the corner, that's me, going, oi, data ethics, remember about that, it's important. And also understanding that doing it right at the beginning will allow us to be better at the end and get a better result and actually go faster. It's that whole thing of go slow to go fast. And I keep on coming back to the example of the early 2000s and GM. And we forgot to go and talk to the public. And the public were like, hell no, we don't want to borrow this. And as a result, over the last 20 odd years, we've had, I think last time I looked, it was about 5 trials outside of the lab. And it's because we forgot to talk to people. We didn't bring them with us. We didn't have the trust and the confidence. I come from Stats New Zealand. If we lose the trust of the New Zealand people, we cannot gather data. If I don't have data, I can't build statistics. If we don't have statistics, we cannot do any policy because we don't have an evidence base to say this initiative here is going to actually have positive impacts here. I have got to keep the trust and confidence. So if I don't keep talking, me as a metaphor for the government, if we don't keep on talking to you, actually you won't trust us. And we talk about the insurrection in America. We had our own insurrection here. We had people on Parliament grounds, and I never thought I would ever see that in my lifetime. We are losing the trust of people, and we need to be able to start building it back up and actually having those conversations. Me doing something in secret behind the scenes is not going to work.
Actually, can I ask a question now?
Sure.
I agree with what you said about genetic modification.
A lot of people don't, but I keep on using it so I can find someone.
Yeah, we're on a different path than
Yeah.
conversations happened earlier. Is the consultation going on now on biometrics like a conscious effort to start a conversation differently before things get shut down?
Yeah, I think it is. And what's really, really interesting about that is it's being led out of the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, which is within the whole government scene, slightly removed because he is independent. And actually, that allows a different conversation because he's not government. And if we don't start having that conversation, it will mean actually we will get negative consequences again. And so I'm really interested in how that goes. And there will be the biometrics, and then you're starting to see the stuff with the facial recognition.
Behind foodstuffs, but not too far behind, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, I've always been interested in this, and this goes back to that whole thing around technology agnostic. Yes, there are issues with our Privacy Act, and we all know that. It's 20 years old. It was cutting edge 20 years ago, and people looked at us and go, God, they're good. And actually, When that stuff with facial recognition started in the Dunedin supermarket about 5 years ago, the Privacy Act was actually good enough then to be able to deal with some of it. And that's pretty good legislation from a legislative person to say your act in a heavily moving space has lasted 20 years. And that's the importance of actually thinking beyond the technology and thinking about the harms that are being done. And I keep on coming back and pointing to the Privacy Act as a really good example of legislation done well. We could possibly update it, but that's not my brief, so I can't talk to it. But if you're talking to anyone in that scene, they should update it. Yeah, the whole idea was coming in and being able to do it. When they rang me up and said, hey, can you come in and do this? The first thing was, actually, your team's always going to be tiny. I have a third of my team here today, Amelia. We're tiny, but that was always the idea. It was never about us. It was about all of you, because you're all of my data points, basically. I will use all of you to be able to get the message out, and that's what we're trying to do. You can't hold it in one place. It has to be a network of networks. On the issue of data and the gaps that we have within our data, we know we've got gaps as government. We don't have enough information about Māori, Pacific, ethnic communities, gender diverse people. We're building on it constantly. I know if you were in the conversation yesterday on the policy, the AI policy, my colleague from the Department of Internal Affairs talked about the IDI, our data infrastructure around actually what do we know about people, and it's all integrated across many different aspects of government. You've got education, you've got health, and you've got all of the different places feeding into it, and then we strip it out so that we can't actually tell who it's about, and we can start gathering all of this information. Alongside this, we have the Longitude Business Database, which is about our business partners, but talking about this just because this is the whole ethics thing. Using this, we can see where the gaps are, and we know that we can't do good research and good policy analysis if we have gaps. And so we're starting to build on different things. Last year, our treaty partners gifted us the Māori Data Governance Framework, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this later, and we can have conversations about it, so I've just touched on it briefly. But it's a model to actually start challenge our thinking about how we work with Māori data and what we need to be thinking about. We also are trying to drive better outcomes for our Pacific communities, and we signed a memorandum of understanding last year in order to be able to bring more Pacific voices into our data to understand it. But we know that we need to do more. The IDI is not ready for AI at the moment. It is protected like you wouldn't believe. And if you wanted to get, I'm sure, how many people have used the IDI within here? Couple? You need to sign things up to the wazoo in order to be able to use it and use it within an incredibly safe environment. It's a very powerful tool. And also our legislation that was brought in 2022, the Data and Statistics Act, if you use our statistics, you need to publish the statistics so that everyone can see that you're using them, and we will identify every single person who's using them, and also you will sign a confidentiality agreement, and that confidentiality agreement goes to the grave with you. You can never talk about any individuals that you've seen within the data. Once again, this is just some of the stuff that we're doing to build the trust, and until we have the trust, we cannot use this data for some of the advanced technologies that we're talking about, because it could go wrong very, very quickly.
I have a question.
Yep.
So the IDI, is it right that it's available for research but not for operational purposes?
Yeah, so it's available for research, and then if you're bringing any technologies into it to use within the data lab, they need to be approved by statistics. And so therefore things like AI, we've not approved AI use at the moment within that environment. The research can then go on and you can look at doing operational type things with the research outside of that, but yeah, it is a research tool. So, we're new. we're 6 months. I think last time I was in Auckland in September last year was to launch the centre at the AI Forums conference. And I don't know what I'm doing. So my whole raison d'etre was to actually come out and talk to people. So we've been through a service design process to go and talk to people to say, with the centre, what is it that you actually need? What is useful for us to do? And we've, I don't know, talked to individually about 500 people, and then I don't know how many people in conferences like this to say, and this is what we'll be doing later. Tell me what you think I should be doing to help you in this space, and we'll run through that in a wee minute. But we've gone through the discovery, we've looked at the opportunity, everyone said, yeah, it's a great idea, you should totally start something, and now we're in the prototyping. So the second half of my team is back in Wellington today, prototyping some digital communities, and actually how do we start building this across Aotearoa. And I'm going to get onto those in a second. I've got 2 computers going because I didn't send the notes to this one, so I've got the notes over here just to keep me on track if you're wondering why I'm working across 2 computers. So across the network, we've basically boiled things down to 3 areas where we want to be working. Facilitating connections, guidance, and influence. And we've got 14 prototypes currently underway, which is quite impressive with 3.5 people. So just kudos to the team for being able to do so much. So the first one that I was going to talk about is facilitating connections. So the team's working on this at the moment. What we heard from people is that they wanted a space where they could actually talk to their colleagues to ask the questions on, you know, how creepy is this really? How do I get around this? What does this look like? How do we do these things, but in a safe environment? Because when you're talking about a lot of this stuff, it's really sensitive and people feel quite vulnerable when they're having these conversations because ethics is really, really tricky. And so what would it look like in order to have a closed community where you could have these trusted and yet authoritative conversations with people that could actually help guide you. So we're working through that at the moment.
Can you just describe how broad is this group? I take it it's not one organisation or one employer.
No, so yeah, good point. And that was in my notes, but I skipped over them. So I sit within Stats New Zealand, but within Stats New Zealand, I report to my CE. He has many hats. His hat for this one is the Government Chief Data Steward. So about 10 years ago, they decided that no one in government talked to each other because we're all useless and introverts. And so they created these system leads. We have 6 system leads, and the system lead works across the whole of government. And so as the data steward, Mark can go into any government department and say, you need to be doing this with your data, we need to be thinking about this, and actually has responsibility for all the data that sits within government, which is useful because whilst Stats collects the majority of data within the government sector, we don't have all of the tier 1 statistics. A lot of other agencies will collect statistics for us and we will gather them up and make sure that they are high enough level for them to have that authority that you need your National Statistics Office to be able to do. And he also has a role to ensure we're not doing anything stupid with our data so that we can keep trust and confidence. Trust and confidence is named in the cabinet paper on something he needs to be worried about within data, hence me. The irony. No, honestly, I'm very good at what I do. I'm just a bit irreverent. He needs to be thinking about Māori data sovereignty and what we need to be doing with that, and he needs to think about data capability. And that becomes really critical when we're talking about the advancement of AI, because anyone can become a coder. And so therefore, what does that mean if they don't have a basic understanding of the importance of data and the role data plays in the data cycle, and yet they're using all of this data they don't understand to put it through really advanced technology that will produce things that they can't necessarily explain at the end. And so how do you get capability in the data space of people who aren't data analysts? And so that's something that we need to play around with at the moment too. The other things that sit within the facilitating connections that people told us that we need to go and think about is actually learning events. If you don't know someone with a lived experience, how can you think about their perspective when they are, when you're doing research? And so we're looking at things like human libraries, getting in different communities to talk to our data analysts, and we're doing that within the transformation. So Stats is going through a transformation at the moment. The census will probably not look like what the census has looked like previously, because the world over we are having to move on how you actually collect data, and we need to be thinking about data for new data-driven technologies. So what is the data we need to be collecting? And so getting in people with lived experience to be able to say to our data analysts, this is why I don't give you my data, or when I give you this data, this harm happens to my community. Think about that, please, as you start gathering it, and just getting those conversations going. Wānanga, to be able to have the really, really deep conversations and just ongoing engagement. We were then told to bring in guidance. There is so much guidance out there in this space. This is one of the pieces that we have, Ngā Tikanga Paihiri, which is guidance on how to work with data if you're working with Māori data. It's a really, really good piece of guidance if people haven't seen it before. But all of the guidance is on different websites, hidden in someone's archive over here. And so we're working to be able to actually bring that together into one website and to say, these are the basic guidance tools that you need. This is, this is the principles, the high level. This is what data ethics is. Here goes some tools for you that you can use so that you've got some really practical applications. And here goes the stories of how to use it so it's used well. So we're navigating through that at the moment. Other things in this space is also being able to create small multidisciplinary teams, because particularly in small organisations, you may not necessarily have the skill set. So being able to have people come in, fly in, and actually help you with some of this, and so that you're sharing the resource around. We don't need to all create huge teams to be able to do this. We're too small. We're 5.1 million people at the moment. We're too small to be doing that. Starting to run gaming events, and we're working on that next week, so that in future, when I come to conferences like this, you won't see me talking. We'll actually start playing games, so you can understand what it is to think about data ethics in a different from different perspectives, and actually just make it a little bit more fun, because if people laugh, they remember things more. Curating data ethics training. There's a lot going on at all of the different universities. No one knows where it is, what it's doing, what it specialises in. Let's just bring it together in one place. A lot of this stuff is really, really basic. It's just that no one's ever done it before. And when I was talking to Ali Knott yesterday, he was like, oh, part of this is just the education. I don't know who to go and talk to. Actually, I'm out talking to a lot of people. If you don't know who to talk to, email me and I'll probably be able to tell you, because, by the end of the year, I probably would have met all of the 5.1 million people. I'm out talking to a lot of people. And then the final one is around influencing and thinking. So another big thing is when you're talking about this, and we're talking about the fact that it's a societal revolution as opposed to a technological revolution, what's coming down the pipeline? Legislation, and more importantly, behavioural change, takes a long time. I need to know what's happening in 15 to 50 years' time in order to start the government processes now and to have legislation in place that will actually be useful. And so starting to think about how do we bring all those pieces together. I have no interest in setting up our futures team because I got 3.5 people. So actually, who's out there? Who's already doing this? How can I just actually tie into what they're doing and then bring the data ethics lens over the top of it? Other things we're thinking about within this space is hackathons. Everyone loves a good hackathon, so how do we bring people together and actually start playing with those ideas? In a different environment, when we build ourselves up a little bit, it would be really good to be able to throw out big challenges and actually have people bid for funding to be able to do the challenges to solve some of the gnarlier problems. We're not there yet, but it's definitely what people have been telling us they want. And so it's on my list for I need to be working through how I can do that. And then also, we're a small player in a much, much larger system, linking internationally. So we've got the Data Ethics Advisory Group, which I'm about to talk to, connecting with all the other data ethics advisory groups around the world and actually saying, hey, you guys are probably facing the same problems as us. How do we think about it? The Data Ethics Advisory Group is filled with academics, practitioners, business people, experts within Māori data sovereignty, people that represent the disability community. They come together once a month and government agencies bring problems to them and they say, these are the things that you need to think about to not basically stuff this up for the whole of government. How do you start thinking about it? What do you need to make changes? And you've seen things like the Ministry of Education, and they changed the decile system and what that would look like. They took that to the Data Ethics Advisory Group because that had huge impact on society and how you do things. We had the consumer affairs people when they were looking at the consumer data rights and what that looks like, coming and having a bit of a chat about these things. Our own transformation team, as we start developing new ways of collecting data, talk to them every single month. They are a standing item to make sure that they don't do anything that is just plain stupid. And so actually putting in place where bringing in people from outside to be able to put eyes on it, and then taking that out to the world saying, what else do we need to be thinking about? What are we not seeing?
Is it optional? Is it mandatory?
Optional. Optional. I am very much a get more flies with honey. And so therefore, and also it's an advisory group. They advise, they do not direct. And part of that is because I don't want people hiding stuff under the carpet. And so it is just actually trying to get that whole friendliness. And this whole folksy charm, I'm sure you're all charmed by me, sure of it. The folksy charm, that is actually part of the whole thing, because it shouldn't be a, this is what you need to do, because you'd all turn off and you wouldn't listen to me anymore. And so it is actually just part of that whole, actually let's do this as a friendly way, it's a conversation. I am starting to run out of time because I have got very chatty. So I'm going to just rush through these ones, but every time I come out to these things, people talk to me about Māori data sovereignty. It is, honestly, this is New Zealand's superpower. If we can crack this and actually taking a te ao Māori perspective into the world, the work that we're doing, we will crack all of the stuff that we're worried about. Because it is that whole idea that you are what your past is and you are where your future is and you're connected and it is holistic and we need to be thinking about this. And data is a taonga and we should be treating it with respect. We are still working through this as a government, but Te Kaharararunga has gifted us this whole model, which is based on 8 po with 5 values that sit within it. What I love most about this, they don't mention ethics in any of this stuff, because ethics weaves its way through every single piece of this. And they state that very early on. Ethics is critical to everything. You cannot divorce it from any of these conversations. We've got a work program working through a number of these po to make sure that we're actually starting to progress this, but it is something that collectively we need to be able to discuss. And we talk about Māori data governance, but we also need to be thinking about Pacific data governance. We need to be thinking about ethnic data governance and just sovereignty across our own data to be able to feel comfortable with what we're doing. But I honestly think this is going to be incredible. So where to from here? We're building. We're starting conversations. And it will be ongoing, and it will change as the technology's changed, and we'll need to pivot. But actually, by being agile, that's what New Zealand is small, and as a result, we do things on the smell of an oily rag. But that also gives us a lot of flexibility to be able to move. This ship will never be that big that I can't move it. A little bit of a maritime reference back to one of my old jobs. You didn't even notice it, did you? So, what I'm going to do now is go into a little bit of what do you want from a Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation? As researchers, what is helpful for you? And so, I have, oh yeah, that was just my nice getting involved. It doesn't look so good on the big screen. I've got 3 prototypes that we're playing with, and I've just gathered them up. These are actually about 7 different prototypes, but wānanga, networking events or spaces, so that actually, how do you bring people together? What does it look like, and what do you need? Understanding subpopulations, getting out to the community, understanding the lived experience. What would be a helpful thing, service or product that would be useful for you? Some of the things that we're talking about are case studies, human libraries, things like that. And then just the innovation side. What innovation challenges, what hackathons, what would be useful?